Hello, I'm Jo Lauria. Welcome to the online presentation of the 23rd National Ceramic Competition. As the juror, I'd like to walk you through the selections I chose for the exhibition. These will be presented in the following slideshow. I hope you will have a chance to come visit the San Angelo Museum of Fine Arts before the show ends on September 6th. Now let's get to it. I thought you might be interested in the judging criteria. So here, in no particular order, are the standards I applied to each object. Was the work imaginative? Was it innovative? Did it have a strong point of view? And so on. The cup featured here was selected as it has a novel take on tradition, contemporizing the shape of an ancient Greek vessel and adding enduring drawings demonstrated to me that the artist has an authentic voice. Here's a snapshot of the exhibition by the numbers. Over 800 submissions received, from which 116 works were selected, representing 102 artists. And for clarity, I have organized the accepted work into categories or sections designated by major themes. Additionally, I have used comparative images where I thought they were relevant. The category of figurative stories is a rich and strong one. Sandy Calhoun presents two childlike figures that are based on her obsession of people watching and eavesdropping. These sculptures result from the artist processing her observations through clay to create these delightful imps caught in the moment of beguiling humor. From the humorous to the emotive, a masked female figure evokes mystery behind her shield. The viewer is presented with a scenario to decode, and the artist has provided the main clues: the mask, the young girl's posture on folded knees, and her grasp of a rag doll. Reading the clues, they tell a story of isolation, longing, and aloneness. Artist Linda Ganstrom provides us with a stereotype of Marie Antoinette. The artwork conveys another form of a masked figure, as the ill-fated queen, through extreme fashion, makeup, and lavish lifestyle, shielded herself from the harsh realities endured by the French populace. Marie Antoinette's closed eyes and resolute stance prefigure her demise. Portraits with closed eyes beg our attention. It is an excellent device to engage the viewer. Here, the artist plays with the double meaning of asleep, asking us to accept both concepts of her parents' posture, that they may indeed be at rest, or these may indeed be death masks. I selected several portrait sculptures for their overt display of pathos. Miller's helmeted soldier belongs to this grouping. The soldier asks the viewer to consider both his station of power and his powerlessness in the face of war. Continuing with the theme of pathos, I find the same intensity and provocation in these two works, the portrait by Ian Thomas and the self-portrait by Robert Arneson. They both have pitiful expressions and open mouths, and this, to me, screams for my attention. The sheer impact of the frontal assault cannot be underestimated as an effective strategy. Likewise, Jess Wade's expressive portraiture recalls the intensity of a Francis Bacon self-portrait for me, as it is replete with an urgency of mark-making, intensity of color, and fragmentation of the narrative. In Wade's ceramic work, the rivulets of running glaze seem to dissolve the portrait, leading the viewer to contemplate the destructive nature of time and aging. The narrative driving Sean Erwin's portrait sculpture is no less intense, but is much more obscure. The portrait head sits atop a prickly cactus on which a turkey vulture has landed. Below is the projected image of a nude woman in a camera lens that is bedded in the cactus pot. Flesh cactus is indeed a puzzle that demands to be solved, but resists resolution. Artist Jill Bell sculpts figures that are caught in predicaments that are simultaneously humorous and pathetic. Her aim is to provoke empathy, as is that of Aaron Caldwell, who expresses his vulnerabilities of, quote, queerness and blackness in his work. Note that his composition includes both nails and thread, alluding to masculine and feminine qualities. Highlighting female attributes is the central focus of Perez-Miller's assemblage. She has dressed and accessorized her childlike figure to depict an archetype of the strong female role models by whom she was surrounded growing up in a Hispanic culture. Also note here the inclusion of rolling pins as a headdress. These are loaded with references to the domestic space and to the ceramic studio. Another strong female role model is portrayed by Pally Girl. The artists deliver the narrative through literal and pictorial body language. Encircling the body are self-affirming words and phrases such as trust yourself, powerful, inner voice, brave, and beautiful. These inscriptions define the contours of the girl's physique while simultaneously revealing her private interior thoughts. Several artists gravitated towards the time-honored tradition of giving animals human qualities to tell their stories. Here, the rabbit is powerless to prevent the foolery of deforestation. And a rabbit by another name? Yes, this is rabbit that purports to be a field marshal. And we know that because his military jacket puts him in command, proving that the clothes make the man, or in this case, elevate the jackrabbit. And moving through the evolutionary scale, artist Richard James equips his two primates with tools and clothing, but positions them in a state of inactivity, unaware of their purpose and not knowing how to utilize the tools the artist has provided. Of course, clay sculpture is an open field that embraces a multitude of directions. The next section focuses on sculptures that are not based on figuration. Casey Whittier's floor sculpture comprised of interlocking clay rings is obsessive, ambiguous, and a bit absurd. It caught my eye immediately as its curious form begged to be interpreted. Is it a fragment of carpet? Perhaps a torn map? An embroidered tapestry of flowers? I came to learn it is none of these things, and I eventually came to the conclusion that it is a non-objective sculpture honoring obsessive labor and clay's tactility. I also admired the work of other artists who exploited clay's inherent malleability and textural possibilities. And artists who manipulated clay's plasticity to create sculptures of tempting sweets with syrupy pools of glazed frosting. Or artists I credited with skilled hands at creating deception, such as Suzanne Wolfe, who sculpts in clay seemingly soft, squishy pillows that are tasked with documenting her dreams. And another masterful illusionist I'd like to point out is Kazuma Sambi, who transformed an historical reference into a personal fetish. Or the sleight of hand artist Ariel Bowman, who fabricates fantastical landscapes that magically conflate time and space, commingling prehistoric animals with 18th century French decorative arts. And finally, I responded to this clay sculpture that is, according to the artist, born out of the desire to visualize the fragmentation of memory. The artist does this by dissecting, altering, and assembling the fragments into a recombined dimensional form. Whatever the motivation, this pillared sculpture was very attractive to me because I thought it was an ambitious endeavor. Now moving from the sculptural object that occupies the floor or the terrain of the pedestal to this next section, which commands the territory of the wall. The first example takes its cue from devotional icons suspended on church walls. Kimberly Levon Luther uses the wall plaque format to enshrine her haloed saint. And wall tiles are the choice of the next two artists who use the format to observe their natural surroundings and zoom in on a moment frozen in time that depicts nature's balance of food source and predator. And continuing to use the wall object to focus our attention is Beth Schute's drawing of a handheld mirror. The mirror, a reflective surface that captures and returns our curiosity, incites us to search for the story framed within the story. Wall artworks can also have a strong association with place. Decker's wall tile refers to urban industrial architecture, while Gargano's wall sculpture represents the architecture of the human body, here melted with mechanisms of an industrial world. A more literal representation of place is the wall sculpture Last Chance Gas, which illustrates a nostalgic location arrived at during a mythic journey. Its evocation of atmosphere, time, and isolation remind me of Gifford Meyer's ceramic series, Real Estate. Nicole Woodard's clever wall work of 3 sculpted headboards and footboards connected by graphic lines throws into high relief the poignancy that objects carry when associated with specific places, such as beds and bedrooms. The emptiness of these 3 beds, their awkwardness, and the forced perspective of the composition convey a tale of grief, loss, and decay. Decay is also the core theme of this tile installation, the largest in the section. I applaud the artist for communicating the concept of decay in a unique manner. The porcelain tiles feature ordinary household objects presented as still life sketches, seeming to describe a domestic scene. The living roses that are affixed to the wall interject the ideas of time and mortality, as the roses will soon droop and decay. An added layer of meaning is the impermanence of the flowers, contrasted to the permanence of the porcelain. This next category, functional imperatives, presents a vast variety of functional objects that are exemplary. Qualities that I singled out included reinvention, as seen here in these ceramic goblets that are skilled recreations of antique Venetian glassware. I also singled out vessels that artists rendered exceptional by their knowledge of materials and mastery of techniques. I was impressed by the surface detailing and painterly approach of these plates and the decorative embellishment and tactility created by the glaze overlay on this pair of platters. And I found seductive the sensuous volume of this soda-fired vase. An unexpected surprise, 2 brave artists submitted a more poetic interpretation of volume and utility by carving through container walls and thereby undermining their function. But in return, they provided us with dazzling patterns. Sometimes utility took a turn towards cultural nuance, where containers became vessels of meaning, where words inscribed on their exteriors provided the context of their purpose. A quieter example with no words is trees. It's a bowl-like container that exhibits exquisite design. The 2 separate bowls are visually joined together by the artist's sure-handed drawing. Well, some containers took the form of a figurative vessel, such as this boat decorated with wavy lines. Others took the form of a handled box with splashy dots, while still others assumed the form of covered containers sporting rice patterns and a sake set imitating floating glacier ice. Indeed, lidded containers were a favorite form. These 2 are vibrant and seductive in their surface decoration and textural qualities. And this triptych ignited my interest by its alluring geometric ornamentation, most remarkably achieved through the raku firing method. Diversity of form and surface offered inspired choices, and this artist's cylindrical container took the high road with an embellished design that was as eye-catching as a Victorian crazy quilt. Some of the more complex functional pieces included teapots, as by nature the form must be balanced, ergonomic, and well-positioned to pour. And additionally, it should provide visual pleasure in its usage, as can be seen in this teapot pair of communicators, where the artist teases the eyes with optical striping. Or consider this teapot pair where the visual delight is delivered in the jaunty movements of the various parts: base, body, handle, spout, and lid. Other teapots were pleasing that followed traditional form, but did so with exuberance, while others decided to provide visual excitement by inventing their own shapes and context. And invention was central to the strategy of this pair of artists, who entered their amalgamation of taxidermy techniques and porcelain throwing skills to arrive at a truly imaginative and humorous tea service. Now on to the next category, cup iterations, and I chose to identify them by motivation. This is cup as canvas. The artist has chosen to activate the form with a painterly narrative that covers all surfaces. This is cup as metaphor. The surface carving of water lines from the artist's own home, conjoined with fragments of nature, are meant to represent the intersection between the built and the natural environment. Cup as experience. The surface on these wood-fired cups show the effects of the kiln firing experience that leaves wood ash deposits and flame marks on the stoneware. Cup as personal narrative. Interpretation is here left in the hands of the viewer. Cup as concept. Based on Gertrude Stein's phrase, "A rose is a rose is a rose," the cup presents itself as an object, an image of an object in the mirror, and a literary construct. Cup as symbolic, signifying communication and cooperation and cohesion. And cup as instrument of empathy. The injured, burdened, and busted cups present their painful fate as irreparable and useless receptacles. And lastly, a category that defies categorization, but nevertheless seduces with joyful perplexity. Note Nate Ditzler's creation of an amorphous blob form that the artist intends to playfully represent the individual floating in a perpetually unresolved state, and Rebecca Harvey's sculpture of common objects that she has reformed, glazed, and positioned to abstractly fashion an imagined world that balances control and chaos. Matthew Brugger's work also posits an imagined world of familiar objects. They are whimsically restructured to highlight their dubious functionality and questionable provenance. Knobs is also an interactive sculpture that emits squeaky noises when knobs are pushed and twisted, and this performance can be viewed in the video posted on the museum's online gallery. Likewise, these artists envision a parallel universe. Cup and Cistern is a blending of sci-fi movie tropes with aspects of Yixing teaware. It produces a cup tubing contraption that suggests leakage and faulty connections. The artist asks us to consider if his hybrid is a relic from the past or a prototype of the future. Hybridity is also the theme of Bustamante's playful sculpture, which, according to the artist, hails from a place in time where technologies have integrated with living organisms and evolved, leaving me and other viewers to ask the question, evolved into what? Artists Taylor and Wood look to the natural environment as their starting points. Taylor's fantastical sculpture is a mingling of references to the landscape, to the body, and to change, specifically changes that occur in the kiln. She uses runny glazes to connect disparate parts that represent an experience of a specific place. Wood's prime inspirations are oceans, particularly what lies beneath the water. Using her knowledge of marine biology, she alters characteristics of chosen species and invites the viewer to experience an alternative world where their existence could be possible. The aspects of nature in which these two artists are interested are transformation and metamorphosis. Their artworks describe biological changes and alchemical transmutations. Caught in the moment of flux, the sculptures become depictions of unearthly organisms. Speaking of unearthly, Jessica Smith's sculpture is fabricated from molded gummy worms that have been configured into a tessellating sculpture. This granular level of invention I find awe-inspiring. And when I saw Heather Kaplan's sculpture, I can't help but imagine it animated, as if it would shuffle right off its pedestal. Mining the aesthetics of carnivals and festivals, the artist also invites us to play with and rearrange the pieces that comprise her assemblage. So in a way, the sculpture does become animate. Jeffrey Michael also invites us to engage in play in his imagined world of, quote, functional fantasia. With a background in product design, the artist proposes a new language of form where objects sabotage notions of intended utility and purpose and evolve into whimsical creations that demand new narratives. Collectively, the objects presented here are testament that contemporary ceramists are skillful and thoughtful and have an expansive range of strategies to convey broad concepts and complex narratives. This concludes the presentation. I hope the viewer will agree that these works have legs and invite further exploration and contemplation. Many thanks for joining me on this journey. Congratulations to all the artists in the 23rd Ceramic National Exhibition. My heartfelt appreciation to Director Howard Taylor, Assistant Director Laura Huckabee, and the staff at San Angelo Museum of Fine Arts for facilitating the jurying process.